Hey guys. So I wanted to reflect briefly on one of the most significant relationships that any of us experience in our lives, and that is the relationship with mom and dad. Now, by no means is it easy to be a parent. You may have children yourself. If not, someday hopefully you will, if you choose to. There is no instruction manual given to parents, and parents are given 50 different pieces of advice on how they are supposed to be a good parent and raise good children that will become good adults. And that advice ranges from extremes of be completely hands off, let your kid do what they want, let them find their own way, let them take crazy risks, let them experiment with drugs, whatever they want to do, they'll survive it, right? All the way to the other end of you should be very disciplined. You should challenge your child. Don't let them get away with anything that you don't agree with. To be very, very strict in your parenting style. The opportunities and the ideas that parents are presented with are usually very strongly influenced by their culture, their religion, the society that they're in, their own experiences with their parents as a child. And the thing is, no one really is clear what's going to work and what's not going to work. Until you're an adult, they really have no idea how you're going to turn out and how they could have done better, but they only get one shot. So it's very challenging for parents, and oftentimes parents tend to choose an extreme. They tend to choose either the much stricter, more disciplined approach or the very hands-off, free-range parenting type of approach. And in both cases, the kids seemed to suffer. As they become adults, they either feel mom and dad didn't care about me, they didn't protect me, I felt like they were never there, I felt like I could do anything, but not in a good way. I felt like literally if I went and died, probably, oops, it didn't matter. And at the other end, you've got kids that grow up and think, I never want to be around my parents again, I feel miserable, constantly judged, never good enough, constant demand for perfectionism in everything that I do. And it's exhausting and unforgiving place to grow up. These extremes are very uncomfortable and they affect us dramatically even as adults. Not just in our relationship with our parents, but this is very key to understand. The relationship that we have with our parents very closely models the relationship we tend to have with ourselves. We've talked with this about Brojo a bit, that you essentially have a parent-child relationship in your own psyche. And it's pretty much, the way I look at it, between your rational mind, which is the parent, and the emotional mind, which is the child. If your rational mind is very strict, it tends to avoid and suppress emotions. Anger, not acceptable. Sadness, you wuss. So, get past it, man up. And at some point we either feel depressed, or we have repressed anger, or we feel overly emotional, or unable to control and react to our emotions. That relationship is very important to understand. Rather than dwelling on the psychological impacts of this, what I wanted to talk about today was actually how you can heal and improve the relationship that you have with your actual parents. And I think that this is one of the key steps to becoming an adult. Because this is the point at which you take responsibility to build the life that you want, rather than waiting for someone else to build it for you. This is particularly important with your parents, who, as we all grew up with, mom and dad were the authority, they decided everything. The moment you take the reins and you decide to build what you want, that changes everything, and it will change your relationship with your parents in very significant, hopefully very positive ways. So essentially this comes down to confronting mom and dad, having a real discussion about your childhood, the things that you didn't like, the points of resentment you may have had, and having an honest discussion about how these things impacted you as an adult. Now this is a very key thing to discuss, to understand, is that nothing may change at all. Mom and dad may say, yeah, you were still an idiot. You're still wrong. I still feel that my level of discipline or my approach to parenting was the right way. People tend to be stubborn. You should expect that this is most likely the response you're going to get. The key thing is, you confronting your parents is a way of you giving yourself respect and avoiding the repression of all that resentment that has built up over the years. You releasing that by talking in a very rational and clear way to your parents about how this impacted you is very significant, regardless of how they react to it. All right? Now, the reason I wanted to give this context is that I had a discussion with Bob Hela, one of our Brojo members, about his experiences confronting his mother and father about some aspects of his childhood that he felt were very challenging for him. And have a listen.
Good to see you, man.
Good to see you too.
Thanks for this.
Yeah.
All right,
I'm pretty excited.
So I've totally caught you off guard here with this idea of filming something, and essentially the reason was we've had some really great discussions over the past year and a half.
Yeah.
About relationship with parents,
Right.
particularly with dad.
Yeah.
Right. And some of the challenges
Right.
that you face and that I face and that a lot of the guys in Brojo also face. And this surfaced again recently, the discussion of guys who really struggle to figure out how to connect with the father figure that they do have in their life. And every time I immediately think, man, you gotta talk to Bob. Bob's gone through some shit. He's got some advice. And I remember way back when we first talked about this, you were kind of in a bad place. You're like, man, I have no idea how to talk to my dad. You know, like we've just got so much kind of resentment from my childhood. Do you want to start there? Do you want to sort of describe where you came into adulthood at in terms of your relationship with your dad?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I could probably sort of like start talking like what sort of relationship did I have with my dad, you know, and what the relationship, how it used to be. So the first, I suppose, most of my childhood, teen, and most of my 20s, I had this very unhealthy relationship with my dad, if you like. I guess what it was more like he believed in corporal punishments, and raised in a very Christian sort of family. It was always the reason for it was that it was, you know, it's the Christian thing to do, discipline your child and that sort of stuff. But one thing that I've only just realized recently is that the reason that I had so much resentment is a big part of it is that I'd never really understood the reason why it had to be corporal punishment, why it had to be in a way that I have to get hurt. You know, it was never explained to me. So somehow, as much as I get it now, but that time I think what it was is more I'm doing this because I love you, and that was the reason that I was given, and I just took that as a value. I just took that as truth, and I just took that as essential for my growing up. And I think the resentment was from the fact that I was told that I was loved, but I never felt it. You know?
Did you equate his expression of love with anger or with, you know, I need to make you into a man the hard way? I mean, how did you process that?
How did I process that? Okay, let me remember. So I think I'm really thinking now. I think I just accepted it that love means you have to be disciplined, and being disciplined, you'll have to suffer physical pain.
Okay.
And it affected a lot and actually as I speak now, it's sort of like things are sort of like overflowing in my head. Come to think of it, in my early 20s, I find things that involves rigid training or physical pain means that I am in a place where I should be, like almost like it's probably, I think it's the reason why I found joining the military as a very good idea, 11 years ago, is because the training that I was going through is very similar to how my childhood was. And despite the fact that it wasn't really the right fit for me, because along my training I was always struggling, and I was never really excelling as such, but somehow it just felt familiar.
That's interesting. My childhood, my father was also quite strict.
Yeah.
And corporal punishment was a big thing for him. But it wasn't based on religious beliefs or the sense that he had to do this in order to raise a good son. It was more just he had an inability to manage his anger response. And that was really tough because it felt like very clearly he's punishing me. There was no other explanation. He just gets angry, and so I was afraid of him, right? Not his beliefs or not being good. It was just like, don't piss off dad, right? That was it. But as it happened, he and my mother split when I was 4. And so that was suddenly gone, and which was okay. But there was a point in high school when I seriously considered joining the military as well.
Yeah.
Or some kind of like that familiarity with you grow through a strict environment. I don't really know what that was, but I tried it out and I was like, this sucks, I hate this.
Yeah,
I didn't continue with it.
Yeah.
Given the option, knowing alternatives,
Yeah.
I decided that wasn't for me. But that's interesting that you ended up kind of following that same exploration. It's like, I feel like I'll grow the most here and become the most, masculine or the most crafted?
Yeah, I feel like this is going to, I think maybe I equated it to discipline, the same way that that was what was ingrained into me when I was a child, that this is discipline. This is going to be good for you, without really understanding why. And I think that for the same sort of reason, I joined the military and still am. It wasn't until lately that things have started to change for me, that when I started getting to know my own values, and now I'm realizing that actually this was never really the best fit for me. Yeah, it wasn't until I started exploring self-development and started to sort of really appreciate my self-worth, that now I realize, like, no, this is, I don't really deserve this, and I deserve something better, and I don't have to go through this to feel that I'm in the right place.
The interesting perspective I have on strict environments, strict cultures, is on the one hand, it forces you in a certain direction whether or not you want to go. So external discipline can grow you. I remember it was like the movie Conan. At the very beginning, he was enslaved. He's strapped to this like mill wheel, and he has to push it. And he's a scrawny little kid pushing this mill wheel. And after a few years, he's, Conan. So he grew through that discipline, right? But I find that at the same time, discipline prevents you from living by your other values. It's very difficult to be, say, creative and compassionate and, even curious when you're in a world where, no, this is what you do, this is where you live. So that was what I found difficult about the military for me, was I was basically told, all the things you want to do, set them aside. This is your routine. And I really wasn't okay with that. But that's the way I related to it.
Right.
So you had this childhood experience.
Yeah.
And then as you became an adult and moved out, how was your relationship with your dad at that point?
Well, it was kind of like a love-hate pretty much all of my 20s. There'll be time that I'd come home and then we'll be good, and then little things. There are things that get mentioned that triggers anger from him, and then he starts sort of like responding, start acting the way he's always act. Like he goes back to that figure that he's always was to me, and whenever he becomes like that, this time around, I respond in because I no longer live at home. I think one of the things that has done for me is sort of like have the courage to sort of like just not put up with it and just fuck off and leave basically. So every time he acts like that, I just bolt out of the house, and we don't talk for like about 2 months, and then what usually happens is just we forget about it, and then we just move on, and things never really get resolved, and so it just happens like that all the time. Or sometimes they'd say something and it pisses me off, and I'd be like, no, I'm out of here, and I just leave. And so the difference is that, you know, when I was a child, I have to be there, and pretty much I don't have a choice. You know, I just go to my room, or I get told to stay in my room, and the whole time I'm just scared or angry or sad, whatever. This time around, I now have the option of leaving, and so I just leave. And then for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, I'll be upset, and it'll stay in my head. And then until it gets to a point that I forget about it, and then things goes back to normal again. But nothing was ever resolved. Nothing was ever discussed in a way that, you know, in a way that things would be better. It was just like that, like, oh. So it was always like we try to sort of like be in the dining table as, you know, as long as we can, and, you know, not stepping on each other's toes as long as we can, and then as soon as that happens, yeah.
Did you, when you were going to go see mom and dad for the holidays or whatever, did you feel a sense of dread?
Yeah, I do. But also a part of me also was like, wanting connection, or maybe validation. I don't know. Maybe a part of me just wanted to feel that. I just wanted things to be different, but I just don't know how. You know, and I think it's coming out in a very insecure way, because I didn't know any better. So I would go and cook something nice, and then I'd be expecting like, okay, what are they gonna say about what I'm cooking? And they wouldn't say a thing, and I get pissed off, that sort of stuff. So constantly, but one thing that now thinking about it, constantly I've always been doing things to validate myself to them. Always.
Interesting. Can you give an example?
Example. Say I would buy them gifts for their.
Was the military decision part of that?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah. I think so. Actually, now to think of it, the decision to stay was part of it. While I was at basic training, halfway through I wanted to quit. It was hard, man. It was hard. And so I was halfway through I wanted to quit, and I was on the phone with my girlfriend that time. So I was like, oh, this is just really awful. And I remember this conversation vividly. I said to her like, but you know, I'm not going home to Auckland and just face my parents and say that I quit.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, so that was the reason. Now that you've asked, that was the reason why I stayed. And all throughout my training, they always ask me every time I come home, and they go like, oh, so how's training? Are you graduating? Yeah, are you gonna get you? It's like, oh, not yet. Even though in a lot of the a couple of the trainings along the way, I actually failed. Like I had to do it again. They didn't know about that. It's like, oh no, training's still going, you know. And then I told them, oh yeah, I finished. I got a certificate, but I actually had to do the training twice. You know, yeah. And all it was, it's just I don't want them to think that I was a failure.
Makes sense. And what's fascinating is that even long after you were an adult, you could make your own decisions, right? You could bugger off and move somewhere else in the world. Dad couldn't say a thing. And yet the need to impress him and have him approve of your life and your decisions and your success was important to you.
Yes.
Have you ever thought about why that was? Like, obviously you had a difficult childhood with him. Where was the love?
I think also not just with my dad. A big part of it also is with my mom. my mom had basically paid her way through college, and in the 70s in the Philippines that's unheard of, and she made it happen. So she puts a lot of weight in academic success, if you like. So getting a degree and and having qualification, that is very valuable to her. And so all throughout our childhood, she's always helped us study, and she's always almost like like training us to be academically excellent. So that's why we're always in the honor roll when we were in school. We're always like, I'm always like, it's like if I'm like I'm in the top 3 the whole time. But I was in my elementary school all the way till the 6th grade. I graduated as salutatorian when I was in the 6th grade, and so and I remember when every time I don't perform well on a test, say, oh, what did you get in the test? Oh, I got 80, and her question would be, who got 100? And there are times, of course, that I actually literally failed. Like some tests you don't do well all the time, and when I don't do well, she'll show her disappointment. And I suppose that maybe it was just not just my dad, it could be also because of my mom, that she expects me to always do well in my training in academic, and that could probably be it as well. So there's an aspect of my mom as well there. Yeah.
Interesting. So what motivated you to change things? What was the first idea you had? I think this is the point at which we began discussing
Yeah.
the sort of tension that you experienced with Dad. And how did you first approach it?
It was not, the first approach was not with my dad, it was with my mom. Yeah. So I took my mom out. Well, it started when that year when I started personal development. The year that I joined Brojo, I went on meditation course, right? So, well, actually, that year was a very big year, 2016. Early on the year, I had a big breakup with my girlfriend, and that basically flipped my world upside down and inside out. And then for a while, I was in a bad place, and then I discovered meditation, Vipassana, which started my personal development journey. And then I found Brojo. That holidays, that New Year's Eve, is something that we always do as a family. Sort of like, my dad wants to do it, like do a devotion, like before New Year, before we enter the year. That's his thing. And then I told my dad, like, this time, Dad, I wanna do this devotion. I wanna lead this devotion. I was like, okay. And then, but all it was really is just that I just went and told them that I believe that life is so short, and I want to let go of all the resentment, all the hate that I have, and I just want to let you all know that I love you. And I said, I addressed them one at a time, like my brother, Vincent, I love you. Constantine, I love you. Mom, I love you. Dad, I love you. Every single one of them. And I think that was the time when they realized that I've changed. And from that point on, they started talking to me differently. But still, nothing was discussed. It was not until my mom's birthday last year that I said, like, oh, I want to take Mom out for dinner, which I've never done ever in my life. Took her out for dinner, and then I was able to open up the conversation. Like, Mom, when I was a child, remember when Dad used to beat me up? I used to really feel abandoned, because you never really do anything. You just let him do it. And then he said, like, no. And he said, like, do you know that we always fight behind closed doors after he does that to you? I don't tell him in front of you because he tells me that you might lose your respect for him. But we always fight. And there was a time where because my dad loves to use his belt. Yeah, he loves to use he loves to use his belt. And then what Mom does is that I didn't know this, apparently she hides his belt so he'll never ever find it. And there was a time that she's collected 6 belts, because every time he loses his belt, he's like, oh, where's my belt? He couldn't find it, he'll buy a new one, and then my mom would hide it again. And that was very liberating for me, knowing that as much as I thought I was abandoned, I wasn't.
Your mom always had your back.
Yeah, she's always had my
Nice.
back.
Moms are awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I just never really knew. And it was very freeing. And then that same year is when I had a conversation with my dad. When he said to me, I don't know how the conversation started, but it was just me. I visited him at home. We had dinner, and he was in the dining table, and dad was sitting there, mom was sitting across, and then the conversation just steered towards how my childhood was again. And I think at that time I spoke with no resentment, and just, this is how I felt at that time. I said, like, this is actually how I felt. And then his face just changed, his eyes got watery, and he said, like, look, this is something that I've always been thinking about for a few months now. Like, since apparently, I think since the New Year's Eve, he's been thinking about it. And he said, like, God knows I pray every night that I wish I could raise you again and not raise you the same way as I did. And he burst into tears, and then he just said, like, oh, and he literally asked for my forgiveness. He said, like, Paul, I hope you could really forgive me. And that was so unexpected. I was blown away. I'm like, almost felt like it was a dream. I was like, is this for real? I've never seen him in that state even now. I can even remember how it felt. After that day, things were completely changing. And that was it was a complete surprise in how that happened. And but I'm so glad that conversation happened, because now my relationship with my dad is 180 degrees to how it used to be. Yeah. And very honest and very authentic, and we can actually, I've always said to myself, like, oh, I wish we could just have this conversation and have a discussion, and now we're having that.
So now when you're headed over to your dad's house,
Yeah.
how do you feel?
I'm excited to see them now. Yeah, really excited to see them now, and I don't know, and sort of like somehow I feel free to be me.
So the confrontation was obviously the turning point. The confrontation where you actually told the dad how you felt and how this created a lot of anxiety and resentment for you. So now what's different for you? What actually changed as a result of the confrontation?
Yeah. This was actually, I never really thought about it as much until we had that dinner one time that you sent me a recording, a bit of a reflection of what you've reflected. I don't know if you remember that, but I still saved it and I listened to it from time to time. That you said, like, it's interesting how now I am now considering, now I have considered becoming an entrepreneur. At that time I was still considering it. Now I realize that I value freedom. Now I am becoming more of like, no, it's not good that, people, 10 sets of people just decides that 10 people decide if I'm gonna get promoted or not. Now I say to myself, like, no, who are you? Who are you to be, who are you that to actually say that I am deserving of promotion or not? And I think now the way I see authority has completely changed, and that's one thing as well that I used to suffer while I was, in first 8 years of the defense forces, that I've always find it difficult to have a conversation with a person higher rank than me. A lot of people can do it, but for me, for some reason, there's this about authority. I feel this anxiety when I'm having a discussion with someone with authority. Now it has completely changed. In fact, now I've taken on like a role as the social club chairman at work. I directly speak to the boss, to the unit commander, and I speak to him and tell him, like, this is exactly how I want it, how I run, and with respect, obviously. But I have more confidence to to do that now.
So this is fascinating. So first, you've got a much improved relationship with your dad,
Yeah.
and your mom as well. Mm-hmm. You've got a completely different reframed idea of how to deal with authority, and you now feel free to pursue your own dreams
That's
without
right.
having the discipline of others guiding you. That's
Yeah.
big ass changes. It's amazing how the relationship with parents affects us so much, man, even as adults. But yeah, I totally respect it.
Yeah.
Dude, I just want to say, I so respect your hard work here.
This is actually a really good reflection moment for me, because all of that I've reflected on each and every one of those, but now we've kind of put it
Put them all
together,
together.
and
Y'all connect,
it's
man.
awesome. Yeah, it's very good. But yeah, I guess one of the advice I would give to people is that if you have an unhealthy relationship with your parents, it might be, and then you find that your life is in a place where you don't find fulfillment, relationships are not working out, somehow you just couldn't have this deep connection with a girl for some reason, like even though you found a really good girl that you could have a connection with, it's just not happening. Maybe the best place to start is, what is your relationship with your mom, with your mother, or if you're having trouble with finding that career that you really want, and you can find the courage and the audacity to just pursue your dreams, start with the fact, like, what's my relationship with my parents like? Because maybe that might just be that blockage that's really stopping you from developing in that area. Sometimes going back to your roots is the way to go, going backwards so you can move forward.
Makes sense. What shaped you to this point?
Yeah.
That defines who you see yourself as.
Exactly. Yeah, and there was one thing that a mate who used to be an engineer, and now he's commissioned to become an officer, and he said this to one of the guys at work. How can you fix a problem with the same mindset that created it?
Yeah.
Which is such a great thing.
Yeah. That's a great way to describe this whole. Yeah.
If you're not gonna change how
and that's the thing, is you're not confronting your dad as much as you're confronting your mindset that relationship can't be fixed,
That's right.
and that he still intends that his behavior towards you was always that strict, right? It was really fascinating that you related. It's like, man, how he felt so much unhappiness at the way that the way that he related to you as a child. Yeah, that's so eye-opening to realize that dad's not happy. Dad feels bad about this whole relationship. Yeah. Awesome, man.
Yeah, so I mean, it's, I guess, one thing that I'm just really, really thankful is that I got to this point, and now I have the opportunity to reset, and actually, and then while I still can, I'm still healthy and fairly young, that I can reset and just and go for my dreams and go for the life that I really want for myself, and find fulfillment.
Sweet, man. Let's get some food.
Okay, let's do it.